Welcome to episode 8 of The Accursed. This is a story you are going to want to listen to from the beginning. If you're just jumping in now, I suggest going back to episode 1 and starting there. This podcast shares some scares and frights. It also delves into adult themes. Specific content warnings are in the show notes of each episode. Please check there so that you can honor yourself and your needs. I woke this morning to the sound of the crows pecking at my skylight, the one in my living room. It's been a few weeks since that had happened, though they have been looming large around my neighborhood. When I went to run errands yesterday, there was a veritable murder of them in the trees that line the street. 50, 60, maybe more. Oh, and so loud. There are even some that were gathered in the yard across the street from me just before I started recording. But they've either flown away or settled down. Today's stories are each from different times in Hazel's life. This first one is from her childhood. This is one of those stories that unsettled me more than the others. But I'm going to read you the story first, and then tell you why. The lake sat at the bottom of the hill, hidden from the house by the trees. It was more of a pond, really, but no one ever called it that. It was always the lake. The lake had a song to it, different from the hum of the woods. It sounded like wind through a wooden flute, though it played the same, wind or not. And there were words that felt just far enough away that I couldn't hear, but would taunt me nevertheless. When I was small and the weather warm, Pop would build a fire in the stone pit right at the shore, and the adults would sit and cackle into the night. If Mama was there, she would swim some mornings when the fog hung low, though no one else ever did. I only ever wanted to stay away. The summer when Gran died, but before when she was just hurt, she asked me to go to the lake and get some of the purple coneflowers she needed for a salve. The fever might have been setting in with the way she looked and that she asked at all, knowing how I felt about being down there by myself. But it had been some my fault, so I went without a fight. The crows followed me like they did then, and waited in the trees as I stood on the edge of the bank, picking the leaves and filling the bag like I was supposed to. I wanted to make quick work of it, but I kept sinking into the marshy ground until I finally lost my footing and fell into the mud, catching myself just before I slid into the water. I struggled to stand, the ground giving way each time I tried. The wind began to pick up and twist around itself. Words, whispers, still just out of my reach, filled the air, until tangled in it all was a laugh, a giggle of a child, a girl. A chill shivered through me and I wanted to run. I tried to scoot up the small incline, but I kept slipping on the muddy ground. The laughter grew and grew, and the reeds and cattails bristled. The crows began to come down from the trees, hopping and cawing as they drew closer. Hazel, a voice sung, too sweetly to find any comfort in. Come closer, Hazel, it said again, like a friend calling me to play. I tried once more to pull myself up over the lip of the bank, but I gained no ground. I grew still, afraid that I might slip even further. Through the reeds and under the water, I could see her, almost. Dark hair and pale skin that the light shone right through. She looked older than she sounded. Older than Gran had been, even. The crows grew louder, their voices overtaking the song, the hum, everything but her. Your mama promised me a friend, Hazel. The ground beneath me grew even softer, and I slid again as the mud below me began to fall into the water. I tried to get back up the bank, but I felt something grab at my ankle, not letting me go. Let's play, Hazel. The crows took to the air as I tried to get loose of her grip. They screeched and screamed as they dove over the water. Oh, Hazel, this isn't very nice. The ground beneath me was sinking, and whatever had grabbed me kept pulling. My feet touched the water, and something sickeningly soft brushed against them. I reached out over the top of the bank and found a small divot where I could place my hands and finally pull myself up. I didn't wait to catch my breath. I ran, the crows above me, cawing and pushing me forward up that hill until I came to the porch and collapsed on the stairs. Gran saw me from the kitchen window and came to see what was the matter. She looked at me for a good long while before sitting down next to me. I handed her the bag of leaves that I somehow kept clutched in my hand. She nodded softly, saying nothing of the missing root. We stayed quiet, sitting on the steps as the sun set. Finally, she shook her head as if waking herself from a dream and told me to go draw a bath before any more mess was made. If the lake sounds familiar, it was mentioned in one of the stories in episode 3. It's where their dog Maggie was found, under the magnolia tree near the lake. In that story, Hazel writes about not liking the lake, not trusting anything that was found near it. She mentions the song that seems to be in the air. This story takes place after her grandmother found the dog, but even still, having read this one, I can understand why she wouldn't want to spend much time down there, especially alone. I wonder how the lake and the woods are connected. If what haunts one haunts the other. Okay, so it's probably just me thinking too much, but there's a little piece of the story that hits close to home. I lived in LA for a good chunk of time a while back, and I was renting a guest house, which meant I was set far back from the street. My bedroom window was right next to the neighbor's backyard and their pool. After about a year or so of living there, in the early mornings, a few times a week, as I would lay in that space of not quite awake, but definitely not sleeping, I started to hear what sounded like a wooden flute playing. It was a rambly sort of melody. There was no song, no starting or stopping. It would just be there until I fully woke up and would forget about it. The neighbors had kids, and I assumed they just had a very dedicated recorder player on their hands. Never mind that this went on for years. No matter the weather, the time of year, or the fact that I never once heard them play hot cross buns. I remember even getting annoyed that it would happen so early some mornings. I really only thought about it while it was happening, and I guess I didn't want to think it was anything other than what it seemed. Anyway, I moved about 5 years later. Was in a completely different part of town, several flights up, all the windows firmly closed. And on the second morning that I was in my new place, I woke up and just sort of lingered in that in-between space. And then I heard it. The same wooden flute, the same rambling melody. At first, because I was so used to hearing it, I just drifted and listened, but then I remembered where I was. I opened my eyes and could still hear it. It didn't sound like it was coming from anywhere in particular, but it also wasn't coming from inside my head, if that makes any sense. I sat up, kind of panicked, and it gradually faded away. I've heard it since, though probably only a handful of times. Always in the morning or very late at night, and only when things are still. I don't know if it's the same thing. I don't even know what my thing is, but reading Hazel's words here, even that short description gave me the goosebumps, and not the good kind. Okay, so this next story takes place when Hazel is older, presumably an adult. Mrs. Hammerhill didn't like me much. She thought I didn't pay attention when she spoke. She thought I was flighty and careless. But it wasn't that. It wasn't that at all. It's just that the woman cried so loudly sometimes that I couldn't hear anything but her sobs. It was a small library, at least it was then. My desk was up front, though partially hidden behind a shelf of history books. I heard her, the woman, first. A quiet whimper coming from an aisle over. There was something about the way she sounded. How her cries lingered in the air. It put a lump in my throat, but I thought I should at least see if something was the matter. I started to make my way over when the air became thick and unwelcoming, as if it were trying to push me back, keep me away. In a fit of stubbornness, I looked anyway, peered down the aisle to see a young woman, tall, slender, a mourning dress just hanging from her form. Her head was in her hands as she cried with increasing intensity. I stared as I watched her pace, appearing and disappearing through the shelves as she did. Miss Hammerhill walked by just then and scoffed at my insolence. I was there to work, not stand by idly. I tried to protest, but she merely tisked and sent me back to my desk to finish the task she had assigned, unconcerned with anything else. Not wanting to ruffle any feathers, I did my best to ignore the woman. But sometimes children would come and tell me that someone was crying. They'd tug at my hand, wanting me to follow them, to help. If Miss Hammerhill overheard, she would brush them off. It was an old building, she would say, with all the creaks and groans one would suspect. The aisle where the woman was, it was often empty. The tension in the air kept people away, even if they didn't know why. I was, however, required to dust the shelves each morning before the patrons arrived. And each morning I watched her. The woman didn't seem to see me, not then, but if I stood in the spot where she had been, a smothering grief would settle over me, making it hard to breathe, to be. I always worked as fast as I could, practically running back to my desk the second I was done. The woman had been crying loudly through the morning. That morning. The morning when Mrs. Hammerhill was searching frantically for a book that was not where it should be. She had me follow her through the stacks as she mumbled to herself about idle hands. The closer we came to the woman, the louder her keening grew. High and desperate. The sound filled my ears until there was nothing else. Mrs. Hammerhill turned the corner and began to walk down towards the woman she didn't see or hear. I followed, though I knew no good would come from it. I followed even as my skin grew hot and something gripped at my throat, making me choke on my words. She stopped, Mrs. Hammerhill did. For a moment. For a moment she stopped, and I thought she'd heard or seen something. Maybe enough of something to turn away, but instead she turned her head to glower at me. "Don't dawdle," was all she said, even though I was right on her heels. The woman stilled as we approached, as if she could see us, sense us. Finally, Mrs. Hammerhill stopped and began to scour the shelf for what she had been looking for. Without knowing, she stopped right in front of the woman. Mrs. Hammerhill's face went pale, and her breathing became labored. She said she felt faint. I moved closer and could see, on her shoulder, a hand, long and elegant, digging into her skin. The noise stopped, and I did my best to steady myself. It was then that the woman looked up, away from her tears and sorrow. Her eyes, deep and dark, found me. Her face twisted into a cruel grin, desperate and foul. I watched as her hand tightened around Mrs. Hammerhill, causing her to sway. I reached out for Mrs. Hammerhill, who thankfully reached back. I helped her as quickly as I could get to a nearby table. My eyes darted back to the woman, who remained unmoving, vitriol having overtaken the sadness. Mrs. Hammerhill made her excuses before settling on the early hour and my apparent carelessness on losing a book I had never actually seen before as the reasons for her stress. But I could see the tremor of fear that coursed through her, the knowing that something was not quite as it should be, but not knowing what it was. She gathered herself, looking angrily in my direction before walking back to her office. I turned to the woman who stood, watching me and smiling still. I smiled right back. Haunted libraries immediately makes me think of Ghostbusters, though this woman is definitely not shushing anyone. I think this is the second or third story where someone is affected by the touch of, I don't know, ghosts, entities, something else. I'm never quite sure what to call them. I don't know what to make of that last line in the story. Hazel smiling back. Maybe she's just happy someone helped her, though that is not a ghost I would want to entangle myself with. Not that there are any ghosts I want anything to do with in case any are listening. If you've got a thought about all of this, I would love to hear it. You are welcome to email me at JoAnna@theaccursed.com. Thanks for listening, and see you next week. The Accursed is written, created, and all around conjured by me, Anna Dane. You can find out more about the show and me at theaccursed.com or JoAnnaDane.com. We're also over on Instagram at The Accursed Podcast. If you've enjoyed The Accursed, please consider sharing it with some friends and leaving us a review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you happen to be listening. The intro and outro song, Cathedral, is provided by Moby Gratis.